Settle into a comfortable position now. Not rigidly, not with any effort, but with the soft intention of letting your body rest just a little more deeply than before. Let your shoulders loosen. Let your breath fall into a slower rhythm. Notice the quiet around you, the kind of quiet that feels like warm dusk settling gently over a field. And as your breathing slows, imagine yourself stepping softly into a distant past, into a world of gentle forests, pale moonlight, and ancient kingdoms resting beneath stars that look down on the lives of kings and hermits alike. Allow that world to open before you, hazy at the edges, soft in the middle, like a memory you have never lived and yet somehow recognize. The story begins long before the birth of the Buddha, in the land of the Shakyas, a small but noble clan resting at the foothills of the Himalayas. Their land was calm, fertile, touched by rivers that glimmered like threads of silver under the moon. The palace of King Suddhodana stood quietly at the heart of this land. Not a fortress of harsh power, but a place of order, discipline, and peaceful prosperity. The king was respected, known for fairness, and beside him, Queen Maya was cherished, known for kindness as deep and steady as the quiet river flowing past their lands. One night, as the moon drifted silently across the dark sky, Queen Maya fell into a sleep deeper than she had known in many years. The palace was still around her, its corridors dim, its guards silent at their posts. Outside her window, the warm night wind moved gently through the branches of flowering trees, coaxing their blossoms into soft motion. Inside her rest, something unusual began to unfold, not with thunder or sudden visions, but in a gentle, luminous manner, like a soft light blooming behind her closed eyes. In her dream, she found herself in a serene forest, quiet, peaceful, vast. The trees rose tall and straight, their trunks pale and smooth, their leaves whispering with the faintest stir of wind. She felt weightless there, drifting through the forest floor as though her feet did not touch the ground. The air was warm, filled with a delicate fragrance she could not name, something pure, something ancient. And then, through the trees, a soft white radiance approached. It was not harsh or blinding, but gentle, like moonlight condensed into form. What came toward her was no ordinary creature, but a splendid white elephant, walking with slow dignity. Its tusks shone like polished silver, its presence calm, steady, and astonishingly serene. As it neared, it lowered its head with a sense of reverence, not submission, but recognition. Queen Maya felt no fear, only a deep, inexplicable peace. The elephant lifted a white lotus in its trunk, a lotus so radiant it seemed carved from starlight, and placed it gently in her hands. The moment it touched her palms, warmth spread through her body, rising from her abdomen to her chest, settling into her heart like a soft glow. And in that moment, the elephant seemed to dissolve into light, entering her dream self with tenderness and purpose. When she woke, the morning sun was beginning to warm the edges of the palace walls. The dream lingered like mist, soft and shimmering in her memory. She felt changed, not startled, not confused, but deeply peaceful in a way she could not explain. When she told King Suddhodana, he listened with solemn attention. He recognized the dream as one of profound significance. Whispered traditions held that such visions foretold the birth of someone remarkable, a great leader, a great teacher, or a great sage. The king summoned wise Brahmins, learned men versed in ancient symbols and omens. They arrived at the palace with their quiet footsteps and gentle voices, carrying scrolls and the weight of years of study. They listened to the queen's dream, their expressions thoughtful, their eyes reflecting something like awe. After quiet discussion, they bowed to the king and queen and explained. The child she carried would become either a great universal monarch, one who would turn the wheel of worldly power, or a great spiritual teacher, turning instead the wheel of truth. As the months passed, Queen Maya felt her pregnancy unfold with a sense of calm grace. Her steps remained light. Her mind remained peaceful. She spent much of her time in quiet gardens, walking beneath flowering trees that shaded her from the sun. Servants noted how the animals in the palace grounds seemed unusually calm around her. Birds perching closer, deer lingering in the orchards without fear. Even the gentle wind seemed to carry a softness around her, as though the world itself recognized the life growing within her. When the time came for childbirth, Queen Maya followed the customs of her people and returned to her parents' home. She traveled with a small company through groves and meadows until they reached the lush woodland of Lumbini. The grove was quiet and beautiful, filled with sal trees growing tall and straight. Their blossoms hung like small white stars. The ground was soft with fallen petals. A warm, gentle breeze drifted through the leaves. Queen Maya reached out to hold the branch of a sal tree, steadying herself as she felt the first wave of labor. And with calm breath and serene composure, standing upright beneath the shimmering canopy, she gave birth to a child, a boy, quiet and healthy, his skin warm and soft as early morning light. According to the canonical telling, there were no miracles that shook the earth, no voices from the sky, only a deep peace that settled naturally through the grove. The kind of peace that comes when something extraordinary begins, without noise, without fanfare. The queen cradled the child against her, feeling his small warmth, his breaths soft and new. The attendants gathered around, not rushing, not panicking, simply offering calm service. Birds rested on branches without flying away. The breeze moved gently through the leaves, scattering a few blossoms onto the ground. The moment felt timeless, as though the entire world paused to acknowledge the arrival of someone who would change the nature of human understanding. News of the birth traveled swiftly. King Suddhodana arrived with joy and reverence to meet his son. The child was given the name Siddhartha, meaning one who achieves his aim. Yet the king felt a thread of quiet concern when the wise Brahmins returned to interpret the child's features. Most of them smiled with serene certainty, saying the child would one day become a teacher of immeasurable wisdom, one who would renounce worldly life to seek truth. But one elder sage, known for deep insight, bowed respectfully and warned that the child was destined not for worldly leadership, but for a spiritual path, a path that would take him away from the palace, away from wealth, away from the life his father wished to provide. King Suddhodana listened in silence. He wished for his son to remain near him, to become a ruler of strength and compassion. And so, in his love and fear, he made a quiet vow. He would shelter Siddhartha from the suffering of the world. He would surround him only with beauty, peace, and comfort, ensuring that sorrow never touched the prince's senses. In doing so, he hoped to prevent the path of renunciation from blooming in his son's heart. And thus, Siddhartha's earliest years unfolded within the walls of the palace, walls adorned with silks and carvings, walls that held within them the fullness of luxury and calm. The young prince grew beneath the watchful eyes of attendants who ensured he never saw sickness, never saw age, never saw death, never saw poverty or hunger or sorrow. Gardens filled with blooming flowers surrounded him. Musicians played soft melodies at all hours. Teachers instructed him in art, philosophy, and physical skill. Every path he walked was swept before his feet. He grew strong, thoughtful, observant. His mind was clear, his heart gentle, his curiosity deep. But the world he knew was not the world beyond the palace walls. And though he did not yet realize it, the time would soon come when the gentle illusions crafted by his father would begin to fall away. Not through chaos, not through force, but through the quiet, inevitable movement of life. For now, the boy Siddhartha played in sunlit courtyards, walked through gardens blooming with jasmine, lotus, and mango blossoms, and drifted into sleep beneath the careful watch of those who wished to protect him from every shadow. His nights were peaceful, dreamlike, filled with the faint whisper of wind moving through soft leaves, a whisper that seemed to call from a distance, from something beyond the palace walls, something waiting for him, patiently, in the world outside. And so the story begins, quietly, like a soft breath before dawn. Siddhartha grew in the palace like a young lotus sheltered from every wind, every storm, every shadow. His father, King Suddhodana, watched over him with a devotion deeper than duty and more intense than pride. From the moment of his birth, the prophecy whispered through the halls like a quiet breeze, that this child, this gentle prince, might one day leave the world behind to seek its truth. The possibility filled the king with fear, and in that fear he built a world meant to keep sorrow forever beyond his son's reach. The palace grounds were expanded, gardens enriched, musicians hired, teachers summoned. Every corner was shaped to soothe the mind and delight the senses. Every moment of the young prince's life was designed to be harmonious, balanced, and free from even a hint of suffering. As a child, Siddhartha walked through the gardens in the early mornings, his small feet brushing soft grass damp with dew. The petals of jasmine blossoms opened as he passed, releasing gentle fragrance into the air. Birds with bright plumage sang tender melodies from the branches, their notes rising and falling like drifting silk. Servants followed at a respectful distance, careful not to disturb his quiet wonder. He would pause often, gazing at flowers as though seeing something hidden within their layers. Sometimes he watched ants marching in perfect threads across the earth. Sometimes he stood still for long minutes, listening to the faint rustle of wind moving through leaves high above. His teachers saw early that his mind was not like the minds of other children. When they taught him letters, he learned quickly. When they placed scripts before him, he read them with ease. When he was guided through the principles of mathematics, he traced the numbers with calm clarity. Yet he never boasted. He absorbed knowledge the way the earth absorbs falling rain, quietly, naturally, without strain. And in every lesson, he asked gentle, curious questions. Not questions of ambition, but questions of meaning. Why do people argue? Why do hearts change? Why do some seek power and others seek peace? His teachers answered with the wisdom they knew, though some of his questions moved beyond what any teacher could name. In the palace courtyard, Siddhartha ran with laughter as gentle as the breeze. Other children played with him, cousins, young nobles, and the sons of trusted ministers. They raced through the tall arches, climbed polished steps, and splashed water from marble fountains. But Siddhartha never pushed or shouted or fought. When he won their games, he smiled with kindness. When he lost, he smiled the same. Even the younger children felt safe around him, drawn to his calm presence without knowing why. King Suddhodana watched from shaded balconies, relieved that his son seemed content. Yet he feared the slightest crack in the perfect world he had created. So the king issued soft but strict commands that no sick person, no elderly person, no sadness, no death, no hunger, no sorrow, no hardship must ever be seen by the prince. Servants swept the grounds not only of fallen leaves, but of anything that might reveal the world as it truly was. Gardeners tended every plant so that no wilted blossom would remain long enough for Siddhartha to notice. Guards ensured that wandering travelers in poor condition were turned away with gentle words. Musicians played cheerful melodies in the halls. Dancers moved with grace. Everything was arranged so Siddhartha would know only beauty. Still, even in such a world, the young prince sensed something absent. An echo missing from the music. A soft space between the colors of the palace. He could not name it. He simply felt it, as a traveler feels the faint pull of a distant horizon. When he asked his mother figures in the palace about the outside world, they answered with comforting stories of lush fields and thriving villages. They described laughter, festivals, and harvests, emphasizing only joy, never speaking of suffering. Their voices were gentle, but Siddhartha noticed the quiet hesitation in their eyes and sensed at times that they concealed something, though he did not yet know what. When Siddhartha grew old enough to begin formal training, the palace brought in masters from various kingdoms. They taught him archery, horsemanship, swordsmanship, and physical discipline. His body grew strong, nimble, balanced. His movements were graceful, never harsh. Even during vigorous training, he remained calm, breathing softly, focused not on victory, but on understanding each movement. His instructors praised him without reservation, astonished by his effortless mastery. Yet Siddhartha did not revel in physical power. He used strength with gentleness, treating every practice weapon as though it held meaning beyond its form. After training, he often walked quietly along the lotus ponds, watching dragonflies hover above the surface. Fish glided below, creating ripples that shimmered in wide circles. Sometimes he sat beneath a rose apple tree, where the shade felt perfectly cool and the silence deepened into something soothing. Under that tree, his mind drifted into calm awareness. Not sleep, not thought, but a soft state of presence. Servants who witnessed this described it later as though the world around him paused when he sat there. Something about the way he breathed, the way he rested, seemed to quiet even the wind. Queen Maya passed from the world when Siddhartha was still an infant, but her sister, Mahapajapati, raised him with tenderness. She brought him stories, encouragement, gentle guidance. Siddhartha grew with a heart shaped by her kindness, always attentive to the emotions of those around him. When servants looked tired, he noticed them. When musicians played with sadness in their eyes, he felt it. But they always assured him, in soft tones, that everything was well. for none wished to seed sorrow in his life. And so his childhood unfolded like a dream, a long, warm dream of order, beauty, calm curiosity, and gentle awareness. But beneath the surface of that dream, something stirred. A soft whisper carried on the wind, an unspoken truth waiting outside the palace walls. Something the king could not hide forever. As Siddhartha grew older, the palace around him expanded in both beauty and silence. The king added new courtyards filled with flowering vines, new pools lined with marble, new walkways shaded by fragrant trees. Everywhere Siddhartha looked, he saw calmness arranged like a carefully woven tapestry. Musicians played throughout the day, their soft flutes and gentle drums drifting through the corridors like warm wind. Servants moved with practiced grace, their steps light, their smiles serene. Every detail of his surroundings seemed chosen to soothe the senses and lull the mind into peaceful contentment. Yet even as the palace blossomed outward, Siddhartha's curiosity blossomed inward. He asked his attendants not only how things worked, but why they were so. Why did night follow day? Why did seasons shift? Why did creatures live and then vanish? His teachers answered as best they could, but often their explanations felt too simple for the depth of his questions. He listened with respect, yet sensed that truths lay beyond the limits of their words. Sometimes he gazed at the sky for long, quiet moments, tracing shapes in the drifting clouds, wondering what lay behind the constant change he observed. Though the king tried to hide every trace of hardship, the world occasionally brushed its shadow across Siddhartha's awareness. Once, when he was very young, a gardener paused in his duties, pressing a hand to his lower back as he rose. The motion was brief, almost unnoticeable, but Siddhartha saw the faint wince in the man's eyes. When he asked if the gardener was in pain, the man forced a smile and bowed deeply, insisting he was well. Still, the prince felt something stir inside him, a soft ache of empathy, a quiet awareness that discomfort existed even in the most carefully protected places. Another time, Siddhartha found a small bird lying beneath a tree, its tiny body still and feathers ruffled by wind. It had likely fallen from a branch during a stormy night. He knelt beside it, touched by its delicate form, sensing something unfamiliar in the stillness. A servant hurried over, gently removing the bird before Siddhartha could linger. They assured him the animal was only sleeping, though he had sensed something different, something final. The moment stayed with him, tucked quietly in his memory like a question without a voice. Despite these faint glimpses, Siddhartha's daily life continued in soft harmony. He spent hours in study or practicing his skills in archery, riding, and meditation. His father gave him the best tutors, ensuring the young prince excelled in every noble art. And indeed, Siddhartha learned with ease. He could draw a bowstring with steady hands, guide a horse with gentle commands, recite verses from memory with perfect clarity. But more than skill, he carried a gentle awareness. When he shot an arrow, he thanked the instructor. When he mounted a horse, he patted its neck with kindness. When he read from sacred texts, he paused often, absorbing not only the words, but the feeling behind them. During festivals, the palace filled with song and bright colors. Lanterns hung from carved beams. Dancers moved through the halls like flickering flames. The air swelled with the fragrance of incense and blooming flowers. Siddhartha enjoyed these celebrations. But even in the midst of music and laughter, he sensed an undercurrent of effort, a quiet strain in the way people smiled, a carefulness in the way they spoke. It was as though everyone worked tirelessly to maintain a perfect world around him, afraid to let even a single thread loosen. He felt gratitude for their devotion, yet also puzzled by it. Why such fear of imperfection? Why did everyone seem to protect him from something unknown? The palace felt safe, yes, but also strangely isolated, like a tranquil island surrounded by waters he had never seen. One afternoon, after completing lessons, Siddhartha wandered into a quiet corner of the gardens. There he found a caterpillar suspended from a leaf, weaving its cocoon with slow, deliberate motion. He watched silently, fascinated by the tiny creature's devotion to its task. A servant approached to escort him to evening study, but Siddhartha held up his hand, asking gently for a moment more. He waited until the caterpillar had fully wrapped itself, then whispered softly, "Everything changes, even when we do nothing." The servant said nothing, but the words stayed with Siddhartha himself. They echoed through his mind during meditation, settling into him with the gentle persistence of flowing water. He sensed truth in them, though he did not yet understand their depth. As he reached adolescence, Siddhartha grew tall and strong, with a calm face and thoughtful eyes. He moved through the palace with quiet confidence, treating everyone with equal respect. Servants adored him, teachers praised him, children looked up to him. Yet Siddhartha felt none of the pride that often accompanies such admiration. He accepted their affection with warmth, but remained humble, always observing, always listening. On warm evenings, he often returned to the rose apple tree where he had sat as a child. There, the air seemed deeper, more still. The sounds of the palace faded into a distant murmur, replaced by the soft rustling of leaves. Sometimes he closed his eyes and drifted into a state of serene awareness, feeling the earth beneath him and the breath within him merge. His attendants watched from afar, sensing something uncommon in the way he rested beneath that tree. An early sign of the clarity that would one day illuminate the world. King Suddhodana, seeing his son grow into wisdom and quiet strength, felt equal measures of pride and fear. Siddhartha was becoming everything a prince should be, yet the king could not shake the prophecy echoing in his heart, that this extraordinary child might one day walk away from palace life. And so the king's resolve hardened. He intensified his efforts to shelter the prince. He ensured the palace walls remained high. He ensured all sorrow was swept away before Siddhartha could glimpse it. He ensured every path remained gentle. But destiny, like the tide, cannot be kept away forever. And outside the high palace walls, life continued, changing, aging, growing, fading, waiting for the day Siddhartha would finally step beyond the world, crafted to keep him from seeing the truth. Siddhartha had grown into a young man of serene presence and natural grace. But beneath his calm exterior lived a quiet yearning he did not yet understand. The palace walls, beautiful and high, had always enclosed his world like a protective embrace. But now, in the gentle turn of his adulthood, he felt a subtle stirring in his heart, a whisper too soft to name, but persistent enough that he could no longer ignore it. It came to him in moments of stillness, when he sat beneath the rose apple tree, or when he watched shadows lengthen across the palace gardens. It came when he walked alone in the cool morning air, sensing the quiet movement of life beyond the gates. One evening, after a day of study and quiet contemplation, Siddhartha approached his father with a request. He wished to see the lands beyond the palace, not from the balconies, not through the careful words of ministers, but with his own eyes. He longed to understand the people he was destined to guide. King Suddhodana hesitated, his breath catching in his chest. The prophecy he had feared since the day of Siddhartha's birth fluttered once again in his thoughts. That the sight of suffering could awaken the prince's spiritual destiny and pull him away from worldly life. With a quiet sigh, the king agreed, but only because refusal might deepen the prince's curiosity. He ordered the roads to be swept spotless, the sick moved out of sight, the poor relocated for the day, the elderly asked to remain indoors. He believed with all his heart that he could preserve the fragile illusion of a perfect world for his son. Protect him from the shadows he feared so deeply. But even the most carefully tended garden cannot prevent the wind from carrying in one stray leaf. The next morning, the chariot was prepared with polished wheels and gentle horses. Shana, Siddhartha's devoted charioteer, stood waiting. Siddhartha stepped into the chariot with calm anticipation, the morning sun warming his face. As they passed through the palace gates, he felt the first breath of real freedom. Cool, fragrant, tinged with earth and distant fields. The world beyond the palace walls stretched out before him like a vast, living tapestry. At first, everything seemed as peaceful as his father intended. The streets were bright with sunlight, families walked together, merchants displayed colorful goods, and children played near fountains. Siddhartha watched them with quiet fascination. The movement, the voices, the shifting patterns of daily life. It felt vibrant and strangely grounding, a glimpse of something genuine. Then, as the chariot turned down a narrow lane, Siddhartha's gaze caught on a figure moving slowly along the road. The man's back was curved. His hair was thin and white. His face was lined with deep creases. His steps trembled as though each one required careful thought. Siddhartha watched in stillness, his eyes widening not with fear, but with a gentle, aching wonder. He leaned forward, touched Chana's arm, and asked softly, "Chana, why does that man walk so differently? Why does his body bend like an old branch?" Chana's shoulders lowered. He knew that he could not hide the truth. "My prince," he said, voice soft, "that man is old. Years have weakened him." "Does this happen to all?" Siddhartha whispered. "Yes," Chana replied. "All who live long must become old." The words settled over Siddhartha like a cool wind, neither harsh nor dramatic, but deeply real. He looked again at the man, saw the fragility of age, the tremble in his limbs, the slow endurance in his breath. As the chariot moved on, Siddhartha's mind drifted inward, turning gently around this new truth. Aging, decline, inevitability, no amount of wealth or power could prevent it. The world seemed different, subtly altered, as though a quiet veil had lifted from his eyes. Siddhartha returned to the palace that evening with a stillness that felt heavier than usual. He ate little, spoke little, and moved like someone listening intently to a distant sound. Something had shifted inside him, though he could not yet name the shape of that change. Days later, he asked to ride again. The king, uneasy but determined, ordered another clearing of the streets. Yet suffering is not easily hidden. It exists in every corner of life, waiting patiently to be recognized. As the chariot moved through a sunlit path, Siddhartha noticed a man sitting in the shade of a wall, his body wrapped in cloth damp with sweat. His chest rose and fell in uneven gasps. His eyes were glazed, his skin pale, his hands trembling with fever. Siddhartha felt his breath catch. "Channa, what has happened to him?" "He is ill, my prince," Channa answered. "Sickness comes to all, just as surely as age." The truth unfolded softly, but with undeniable weight. Siddhartha watched the man's chest shiver, watched his lips tremble, watched the unmistakable imprint of suffering etched across his face. Compassion rose in Siddhartha's heart like a warm tide, not fear, not revulsion, but a tender ache for the man's pain. "Can he be cured?" he asked. "Some recover," Channa said gently. "Others do not. Illness comes and goes like storms." As the chariot drove away, Siddhartha's eyes lingered on the man until he vanished from view. And once again, the world seemed changed. The beauty of life did not disappear, but it was now accompanied by something deeper, a quiet sorrow, a knowing that suffering lived beside joy, inseparable from it. Then came the third sight. One afternoon, as Siddhartha rode through a quiet village road, he saw a group of people walking slowly, their heads bowed. Between them was a figure wrapped in cloth, carried on a wooden bier. The stillness of the form struck him with quiet force. He felt a chill move through his chest. "Channa," he whispered. "What is happening?" Channa bowed his head. "This is death, my prince." The world seemed to stop. The sound of birds dimmed. The air around him felt heavier, thicker. "Does death come to all?" Siddhartha asked, almost afraid of the answer. "To all," Channa replied. "Every life ends." Siddhartha felt a deep tremor of realization move through him, steady but profound. And then, only days later, he saw the fourth sight, a wandering ascetic, calm, composed, walking with serene purpose. Something in the man's stillness called to Siddhartha, soft and certain, like a quiet bell ringing in the distance. "What is he seeking?" Siddhartha asked. "Freedom," Channa replied.
And something inside Siddhartha awakened.
Siddhartha returned from the fourth sight with a quietness deeper than any he had known. But this was not the calm of childhood, nor the soft stillness beneath the rose apple tree. It was a different quiet, one that came from being suddenly awake in a world that seemed to have changed its shape overnight. He walked through the palace corridors as though seeing their colors for the first time, noticing the brilliance of the silk draperies, the soft glow of lantern light, the fragrance of incense drifting through the hallways. Everything was beautiful, yet every beauty now carried a faint echo of something else, something hidden beneath its surface. He would sit in the gardens at dusk, watching shadows lengthen across the pools where lotus flowers opened and closed with the rhythm of the sun. The palace musicians played their gentle melodies, but their songs felt strangely distant, like echoes from a world he no longer fully inhabited. Siddhartha sensed a thin veil between himself and the life he had known. It was as though a delicate thread had loosened inside him, releasing a question that could not be pulled back into silence. At night, he lay awake, listening to the faint breeze moving through the shutters. He imagined the old man, the sick man, the lifeless body carried by mourners, and the serene ascetic who walked with nothing yet seemed to carry everything. Their faces shifted through his thoughts like soft lantern lights drifting in the dark. He felt no despair, no panic, only a deep, quiet recognition that he had glimpsed truths carried by all beings, truths from which no shelter could protect him. Days continued to pass, yet the serene illusion of the palace no longer enveloped him. Attendants approached him with warm smiles, but he saw the fatigue they tried to conceal. Musicians played their instruments with practiced grace, but he sensed the fragility beneath their expressions. Even the gardens, tended so carefully, seemed touched by change. Blossoms opening only to wither, leaves falling gently to the ground, petals drifting away in the evening breeze. One day, while wandering near the northern courtyard, Siddhartha paused beside a gardener who trimmed a flowering shrub. The man lifted his head and smiled respectfully, but the smile carried a softness, as though it came from someone familiar with the weight of long days. Siddhartha asked gently, "Do you ever tire?" The gardener hesitated only a moment. "I do, my lord," he said softly, "but tending the garden brings peace." "And when your body grows old?" Siddhartha asked. The gardener lowered his gaze. "Then another will tend it in my place." Siddhartha nodded, carrying the man's words with him. Everything he saw and heard now seemed to reveal a new dimension of life, one that pulsed beneath the surface of things, quiet but insistent. King Suddhodana noticed these changes. He saw the prince's long silences, the distant look that sometimes filled his eyes. Fear returned to the king's heart, heavy and cold. He had worked tirelessly to protect his son from the reality of the world. But truth had found its way in, as truth always does. Desperate to draw Siddhartha back into the comforts of palace life, he arranged feasts filled with music, dancers, and lanterns glowing like small moons. The halls shimmered with colors, voices rose in laughter, and musicians played with fervor. Yet Siddhartha moved among the festivities like a man walking through a dream. He watched the dancers, admiring their grace, but sensed the discipline behind their smiles. He listened to the musicians, but the melodies reminded him of impermanence, each note arising only to fade, replaced by another. Even the laughter of guests seemed touched by a fragile beauty, echoing briefly before dissolving into the air. After one such celebration, Siddhartha stepped out onto a quiet terrace overlooking the gardens. The moon hung low, casting pale light upon the lotus ponds. He leaned against a carved pillar and let the cool night air brush against his skin. Channa approached quietly. "You are troubled, my prince?" Channa said softly. Siddhartha did not answer at once. He looked toward the moonlit water, watching the slight ripple where a fish broke the surface. "Channa," he said finally, "everything I have known is beautiful. Yet I feel as though I have lived only inside one half of the world. The other half has opened before me, and I cannot close my eyes again." Channa bowed his head, knowing no comfort he offered would quiet the prince's awakening. In the days that followed, Siddhartha sought solitude more often. He walked beneath groves of trees, feeling the earth beneath his feet. He watched the cycles of nature unfold, flowers blooming, leaves falling, insects spinning their brief lives beneath the sun. He saw in each piece of life a reflection of the truths he had witnessed in the four sights. The world changed continually. Nothing remained untouched by time. One afternoon, as he sat beneath the rose apple tree, Siddhartha entered a state of calm awareness deeper than any he had known since childhood. The sounds of the palace faded into a soft hum. The warmth of the earth rose gently through his body. His breath slowed. His thoughts loosened like knots untied by gentle hands. In that quiet state, he felt a profound stillness settle over him. The same stillness he had glimpsed in the wandering ascetic. A peace that did not depend on luxury or circumstance. A peace touched by truth. When he opened his eyes, the world felt clearer, more real, more tender. He knew then that he could no longer remain within the boundaries his father had built. The palace walls, once comforting, now felt like barriers standing between him and understanding. A great compassion stirred within him, compassion not only for the suffering he had witnessed, but for all beings caught in the same cycle of aging, sickness, and death. He realized that if suffering existed, then the path to freedom must exist as well. And he felt called to find it. The wind passed softly through the branches above him, carrying with it a sense of inevitability. Siddhartha rose slowly to his feet, whispering to the silent air, "There must be a way beyond sorrow." And somewhere inside, he knew he could not remain the prince he had been. He was stepping toward a fate that waited patiently just beyond the palace walls. Night settled slowly over Kapilavastu, soft as drifting silk. Lanterns flickered in the corridors, casting long golden shadows that swayed against carved pillars. The palace lay quiet, wrapped in the warmth of late evening. Servants had retired to their quarters. Musicians had played their last notes. The gardens were still, as though holding their breath beneath the silver moon. Siddhartha walked through the silent halls with steady, unhurried steps. His heart was calm, yet full. Full in the way a full moon is not heavy, but quietly radiant. The sights he had witnessed, aging, sickness, death, and the peaceful ascetic, echoed gently inside him. They were no longer distant images. They had rooted themselves in his understanding, shaping a new certainty that grew with each passing day. He knew now that remaining within the palace walls meant living in a world crafted by love, yet stripped of truth. He felt grateful for everything his father had given him. Grateful for the beauty, the teaching, the protection. Yet he understood at last that protection was not freedom, and that love, even the deepest love, could not erase the reality of suffering. It could only postpone the moment one confronted it. And so, on this quiet night, Siddhartha knew the moment had come. He approached the door of his private chamber, where Yasodhara lay sleeping beside their infant son, Rahula. The room was dimly lit by a single oil lamp. Their faces glowed softly in its light. He stood at the threshold, watching the slow rise and fall of their breath. Yasodhara's arm rested protectively around the child. Rahula's tiny hands curled into soft fists near his chest. Siddhartha stepped into the room with quiet reverence. He moved closer, gazing at the small form of his son, the child whose name meant fetter, a gentle reminder of all that bound him to palace life. Yet looking at the boy, Siddhartha felt only tenderness. He knew that leaving tonight was not a rejection of love, but the fulfillment of a deeper responsibility. If he found the path to the end of suffering, then his son and all beings could one day walk it. He knelt beside the bed, lowering his head. The cool stone floor pressed lightly against his skin. A soft breeze drifted through the window, stirring the edge of a silk curtain. He whispered in his heart, though no sound passed his lips, "May you be safe. May you be free. May you one day understand why I must go." He longed to take Rahula in his arms one last time, but he knew that the touch would awaken the child, and Yasodhara with him. And if they woke, their love would pull him back, perhaps forever. Compassion guided him away from that moment. He rose slowly, leaving the room with a final glance that held the weight of both farewell and blessing. Channa waited outside, the moonlight catching the edges of his robes. His eyes met Siddhartha's, and he understood instantly. He bowed deeply, honoring the prince's decision, even as his heart tightened with sadness. The horse Kanthaka stood ready, its coat shining faintly in the night, its great frame poised with quiet strength. Kanthaka seemed to sense the gravity of the hour. He did not stamp or whinny, but remained utterly still, as though offering himself to the journey with full devotion. Siddhartha placed a hand on Kanthaka's neck, feeling the warmth beneath the horse's skin. "My friend," he murmured, though his voice was only a breath. "Tonight we ride beyond everything we have known." Channa mounted behind him, and together they rode out through the palace gates. The guards, by destiny's unseen arrangement, lay asleep or in deep distraction. The night was thick and quiet. The city rested beneath a sky glittering with countless stars. As they rode, Siddhartha looked at the familiar rooftops and courtyards fading behind him. He felt no fear, no regret, only a deep, unwavering compassion. The farther they traveled from the palace, the lighter he felt, as though each hoofbeat carried him closer to something vast and true. By midnight, they had reached the edge of a forest where the tall trees rose like silent sentinels. Their leaves whispered faintly, stirred by a cool wind that carried the scent of earth and night flowers. The moon shone bright, casting long silver beams across the ground. Siddhartha dismounted slowly. Channa stepped forward, not wanting to let go. "My lord," he said, voice trembling, "please return. Your father, your wife, your people, they need you. The kingdom needs you." Siddhartha turned to him with eyes full of warmth, not reprimand. "Channa," he said gently, "all beings wander through life searching for peace. If I remain here, I will never understand the truth. I must seek the path that leads beyond suffering. For myself, for my family, for all." Channa lowered his head, tears gathering in his eyes. He knew he could not follow Siddhartha into this new life. Yet he also knew he would carry the prince's words in his heart forever. Siddhartha knelt and held Kanthaka's head in his hands. The loyal horse exhaled a long, soft breath, as though sensing this was their final moment together. Siddhartha whispered, "Thank you, friend. May you find peace." Then, with calm resolve, he removed his princely ornaments. The jewelry, the sword, the rich fabrics, all symbols of a life he now walked away from, fell softly to the ground. The night accepted them without sound. Channa gathered the ornaments with trembling hands, understanding they would become sacred reminders to the king. Siddhartha reached for his long black hair. With a single stroke of Channa's blade, he cut it short, his final gesture of renunciation. The hair fell to the earth, dark against the moonlit grass. A new silence settled. He stood now, not as Prince Siddhartha, heir to a kingdom, but as a seeker, a wanderer beginning the long road toward truth. He handed the sword back to Channa. "Go home," he said softly. "Tell them I am safe." Channa bowed so deeply his forehead touched the earth. Then he mounted Kanthaka and rode back into the night, the sound of hooves fading slowly until only the forest's whisper remained. Siddhartha stepped barefoot into the trees. The forest enveloped him. The night welcomed him, and the path of awakening began. The night Siddhartha stepped into the forest. The air felt different around him, cooler, wider, carrying the faint murmur of a world that had always existed just beyond his reach. The moon hung pale and watchful between tall branches. Insects hummed softly in the undergrowth. Leaves moved in gentle waves, stirred by a wind that seemed to welcome the traveler into the depths of its silence. Siddhartha walked barefoot across the earth, feeling the warmth lingering from the day, the texture of soil, the soft press of fallen leaves. Each step carried him farther from the life he had known, deeper into the uncertainty he now embraced. He did not look back. The road stretched long and dim before him. He walked through quiet fields, through villages settling into sleep, through groves of mango and sal trees where shadows gathered in slow-moving pools. With each breath, he felt himself shedding layers of identity. Prince, son, husband, father, not rejecting them, but allowing them to fall away, for now, like petals drifting from a flower slightly past its bloom. The world felt vast and strangely gentle in its honesty. No walls, no silk banners, no music arranged for his comfort. Only the living earth beneath him and the endless sky above, full of stars that seemed to shimmer with patient encouragement. He soon reached the outskirts of a forest where wandering ascetics had lived for generations. Stories had told him of seekers who left behind wealth and comfort to pursue the truth of existence. They lived simply, some eating only leaves, some surviving on roots, some abandoning speech entirely. Siddhartha approached their grove at dawn, when the first rays of sunlight filtered through the tall trees and spread soft gold across the earth. A group of ascetics noticed him approaching. They were lean, with sun-darkened skin draped in coarse cloth that wrapped loosely around their shoulders. Their eyes were sharp with discipline and quiet endurance. One of them, named Kondanya, stepped forward. He had once been among the wise men who interpreted Siddhartha's birth, predicting the prince's spiritual destiny. Now seeing him arrive without escort or adornment, Kondanya felt a quiet conviction rise within him. "You have left your home," Kondanya said softly. "Have you come to seek what lies beyond the suffering of the world?" Siddhartha nodded. "I seek the end of sorrow, not for myself alone, but for all who live and suffer." The ascetics exchanged glances. There was something in the prince's voice, some calm certainty, that drew their respect at once. They welcomed him into their grove. There, surrounded by tall trees and ancient earth, Siddhartha began the life of a seeker. Days passed slowly at first. The silence of the forest stretched wide, almost daunting in its depth. Siddhartha sat for hours in meditation beneath broad branches, the wind rustling gently above him. He listened to the distant calls of birds, to insects moving through patches of grass, to the subtle shifting of the world. His mind wandered, but gradually learned to settle, like a lake smoothing after ripples fade. The ascetics taught him practices that strengthened both body and will. How to endure hunger, how to control breath, how to sit through discomfort without moving. Siddhartha embraced these teachings with sincere dedication. Yet even as he learned, he sensed something missing. The ascetics believed that suffering could be overcome by denying the body, starving it, weakening it, breaking its ties to comfort and desire. They practiced extreme austerity, eating almost nothing, sleeping rarely, enduring heat and cold with unwavering discipline. Siddhartha followed their way, believing for a time that such effort might lead to liberation. He ate so little that his ribs became visible beneath his skin. His once strong limbs grew thin and light, almost fragile. His hair grew long and unkempt. His eyes, though clear, sank slightly into their sockets. He walked slowly, carefully, as though each step was a deliberate act of endurance. The forest grew thick around him, and he felt the weight of every moment as he moved deeper into the ascetic life. But even in this harsh discipline, he remained calm. He observed the sensations in his body with quiet curiosity, the ache of hunger, the sting of cold, the trembling of weakness. He endured them, watching how each sensation rose, peaked, and faded. He began to see patterns in the experience of pain, patterns that whispered truths about the nature of the mind. Yet he also sensed, with growing clarity, that weakening the body did not quiet the mind in the way he had hoped. There were days when he fainted from lack of food. The ascetics found him lying in the dust, gently revived him, encouraged him to continue. They admired his endurance, believing that he would soon reach the heights of spiritual attainment, accessible only through extreme effort. And Siddhartha tried with all the sincerity in his heart. But each time he closed his eyes in meditation, he found not freedom, but a mind clouded by exhaustion. One morning, after nearly 6 years of such austerities, Siddhartha sat beneath the shade of a great tree, his breath shallow, his body trembling. The forest around him glowed with the early light, birds calling softly from high branches. He closed his eyes, attempting once again to concentrate. But clarity did not come. His mind drifted, dimmed by starvation. Thoughts floated through him like distant shadows, unfocused, tired, unable to settle. A realization dawned softly. This path, though noble in intention, would not lead him to liberation. He saw clearly that harm to the body clouded the mind, just as indulgence clouded the mind. Both extremes trapped a person in suffering. As he sat there, something deep inside him stirred, like a memory rising gently from childhood. The sweet, quiet moment beneath the rose apple tree, when he had felt a natural, effortless calm. Not forced, not starved, not pushed it. A simple, peaceful clarity born of balance, the middle way, a path between extremes. The insight settled into him with the softness of falling petals. He understood suddenly that truth could not be grasped through punishment of the body or through indulgence of the senses. It required balance, mindfulness, compassion toward oneself and others. A calm mind rested neither in excess nor deprivation. A calm mind rested in harmony. As he opened his eyes, the world seemed clearer, brighter, as though the forest itself recognized the turning point unfolding within him. But the ascetics did not understand. When Siddhartha rose and walked to the riverbank to bathe, his weakened legs trembled beneath him. As he stepped into the cool water, he felt the shock of it ripple through his fragile body. For a moment he staggered, nearly fainting again. A young girl tending to her cattle near the river saw him collapse. Her name was Sujata. She approached him with gentle concern, bringing a bowl of warm rice milk sweetened lightly with honey. Siddhartha accepted it gratefully. The moment the nourishment touched his tongue, a faint warmth passed through his body. Not pleasure, not desire, just the simple grounding of life returning. Strength moved back into his limbs, slow and steady. His mind cleared. His breath grew deeper. The ascetics watched from afar, horrified. "He has abandoned the path," they whispered. "He has fallen back into indulgence." Misunderstanding his sudden shift, they walked away from him, believing he had betrayed the discipline they shared. Siddhartha watched them leave with calm compassion. He did not resent them. He wished only that they would one day understand the truth he had discovered. Now alone, Siddhartha walked deeper into the forest, toward a place called Uruvela, a grove known for its beauty and stillness. As he approached, he saw tall trees rising like ancient guardians beside a river whose waters shimmered in the golden light. Birds flew low across the surface. Leaves rustled softly. The air held a deep, serene quiet, as though inviting him into its embrace. "This," he whispered, "is the place." He sat beneath a large fig tree, its roots curling deep into the earth, its branches spread wide like a great sheltering canopy. The soil beneath it was soft and cool. The distant river murmured gently. The wind carried the faint scent of blossoms. Siddhartha folded his legs, placed his hands upon his lap, and straightened his spine. His breath flowed softly, naturally. "I will not rise from this place," he murmured, "until I have found the truth." And so began the final vigil, the night that would change the world. The grove at Uruvela shimmered beneath the late afternoon sun, its gentle light sinking slowly through the canopy of broad fig leaves. The air was warm and still, carrying the smell of earth and river water mingled with the faint sweetness of blossoms. Siddhartha found himself drawn deeper into this quiet sanctuary, sensing a harmony in its stillness, unlike any place he had visited before. The river, with its cool flowing currents, murmured softly nearby. Beyond the trees, the fields glowed with gold where sunlight touched them, and the shadows moved slowly, as though the world were preparing itself for something sacred. He felt it in his breath, in the rhythm of his steps, in the subtle quiet of his mind. For many years he had wandered, seeking truth in austerity, exhausting his body in the hope that the mind might open under strain. But here, in the gentle balance of the grove, the truth seemed closer, not through force, but through the stillness of being present. The middle way pulsed quietly inside him, like a soft flame. He knew now that neither indulgence nor deprivation revealed the deepest truths. He needed clarity, balance, and unwavering attention. Near a great fig tree, whose roots twisted deep into the earth and branches spread wide like the arms of a guardian, the air felt especially calm. Siddhartha stepped toward it, sensing a deep invitation, like a whisper from the earth itself. This tree, ancient and steady, seemed to beckon him toward its shade. The patch of grass beneath it was soft and flat, as though prepared by unseen hands. He lowered himself to the ground, folding his legs with practiced ease. His spine rose tall and straight, neither stiff nor lax, perfectly poised in a posture of alert serenity. His hands rested in his lap, right hand atop left, thumbs touching lightly. His breath flowed long and smooth, settling into a natural rhythm that eased him into tranquility. He looked toward the horizon, then let his gaze soften until the world blurred slightly, leaving only a sense of shape and color. The sun had begun its descent, Soon twilight would gather, then night would cover the grove like a gentle curtain. Siddhartha inhaled slowly, exhaled softly, and felt a calm certainty. I will not rise from this place until I have found the end of suffering. The vow settled like a stone in deep water. Quiet, steady, profound. As the last rays of sunlight touched the leaves, Siddhartha closed his eyes. The world behind his eyelids was vast and dark, but not empty. It was full of subtle currents, the movements of consciousness shifting and flowing. He felt the flicker of thoughts rising and fading, images drifting and dissolving. He let them come, observed them without attachment, and let them pass. Thoughts were like birds crossing the sky, appearing, moving, vanishing, without the need to chase or hold them. Evening deepened. The air grew cooler. Crickets began to hum in the underbrush. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called out softly. Siddhartha's breathing grew slower, deeper, more aligned with the natural rhythm of the world. The quiet around him thickened, forming a cocoon of stillness. Then came the first stirring. It was faint, like a ripple moving through the surface of a calm lake. A quiet tightening of the mind. Siddhartha recognized it immediately. The old habits of craving and fear beginning to rise. The mind resisted stillness, pushing memories and uncertainties to the surface. He remained unmoved, observing each sensation with gentle attention. Then, deeper still, memories arose, fragments of childhood, images of his father's face, Yasodhara's smile, Rahula's tiny hands. Attachments flickered like small flames. He did not push them away, nor did he cling to them. He held them lightly, watching them dissolve like mist. Night fully settled. The moon rose high, casting pale silver upon the grove. The trees' leaves shimmered gently, rustling with a faint breeze. The world around Siddhartha seemed to slow, as though listening. The forest creatures quieted. The river's murmur softened. Even the movement of the wind grew delicate, reverent. Then, from within the subtle currents of consciousness, something darker stirred. Mara had arrived, not as a figure of mythic terror, but as the embodiment of every inner force that pulls the mind toward illusion. Fear, craving, doubt, pride, and clinging. Mara's presence was not external. It rose from the depths of Siddhartha's own human nature, from the conditioned patterns that shape the suffering of all beings. The darkness thickened slightly, as though clouds had passed in front of the moon. Siddhartha felt a faint tightening in his chest, a tremor brushing through the edges of his awareness. Doubts whispered, "You will fail. You are too weak. You abandoned your family. You have lost your path." Siddhartha breathed in, breathed out. The doubts hovered, then faded like smoke. Next came fear. It arose not as a clear image, but as a sensation. Coldness spreading through the limbs, a shudder of the spine, the mind's instinctive pull toward safety. But Siddhartha remained steady. He sat unmoving, even as the sensations rose and swirled. Fear loosened its hold, retreating as quietly as it had come. Mara pressed harder. Images rose, visions of a life Siddhartha could return to, of Yasodhara reaching for him, of Rahula's tiny arms embracing his neck, of wealth and royal power waiting with open hands. Mara whispered, "You can return. You can rule. You can have love, comfort, a kingdom. Why choose suffering?" Why choose this lonely path? Siddhartha's breath remained steady. He understood now that these visions, beautiful as they were yet another form of attachment. Happiness built on clinging was fragile. Love bound by ignorance was temporary. Power rooted in illusion could not bring true peace. He let the images dissolve, offering gratitude for the beauty they held, but releasing them like petals falling in the dark. Mara grew restless. The ground seemed to quiver. The wind picked up, swirling the leaves in urgent circles. Clouds rushed across the sky, dimming the moon. The forest seemed to sway, the shadows tightening around the grove. The great fig tree stood firm, its roots anchoring deep into the earth. Mara's voice darkened, turning sharp. You, Siddhartha, are alone. No one has walked this path. No one will believe you. You are just a man, nothing more. Siddhartha remained unmoving. His calm deepened. Finally, Mara made his last attempt, the subtlest and most insidious. Doubt wrapped itself like a tight band around Siddhartha's mind. Who are you to seek the deepest truth? Why should you succeed where others have failed? What makes you worthy of awakening? Siddhartha inhaled slowly, feeling the touch of the earth beneath him. His right hand lifted, and he touched the ground gently with his fingertips, a gesture that arose from deep intuition, a gesture that lived within his bones. The earth is my witness. In that moment, the quiet ground beneath him held the truth. Countless lives had brought him here. Countless acts of compassion had shaped him. Countless beings sought freedom from suffering. He did not sit beneath the tree for himself alone. He sat for the world. The earth trembled softly in acknowledgement, not violently, not with spectacle, but with a subtle, grounding assurance, as though the very soil recognized his sincerity. Mara fell silent. The illusions dissolved. The wind calmed. The trees settled into stillness. The night deepened. What followed was not a battle, but a deep inward turning. Siddhartha's mind sank into profound stillness. Thoughts faded one by one. Memories quieted. Emotions softened into silence. He watched each sensation arise and fall, without clinging or aversion. His awareness grew clearer, more spacious, transparent as still water. Then clarity dawned. In the first watch of the night, Siddhartha saw into the long chain of his past lives. Countless forms, countless worlds, endless cycles of birth and death shaped by intention and action. He saw joy, sorrow, fear, love, anger, peace, all woven through lifetimes like threads in an infinite tapestry. He saw how actions led to consequences, how choices shaped experience, how beings moved through the world guided by cravings and fears they did not understand. In the second watch, he saw the workings of karma across all beings, how every action, word, and thought shaped the unfolding of existence. He saw how beings were born, age, fall ill, die, and are born again through conditions shaped by their own hearts. He saw the flow of existence not as punishment or reward, but as the natural unfolding of cause and effect. And in the third watch of the night, the deepest truth revealed itself. He saw the four noble realities with piercing clarity: that suffering exists, that its cause is craving, that its ending is possible, and that there is a path leading to its end. He saw the nature of all things, arising, changing, passing away. He saw the universe as it truly is, impermanent, interdependent, empty of fixed self. Everything in the world existed through conditions, and nothing existed alone. As the final veil fell away, a peace unlike any he had ever known washed through him. Not a peace dependent on comfort, nor the peace of denial, but a stillness rooted in seeing clearly. The mind became vast and luminous. The boundaries of self dissolved like morning mist. Freedom, complete and unshakable, opened within him like a lotus blooming in perfect light. When the first pale glow of dawn touched the horizon, Siddhartha opened his eyes. The world looked the same forest, the same soft river, the same chirping birds beginning their morning songs. But everything was different. The delusions that had bound the mind of humanity for ages had fallen away. He saw no prince, no ascetic, no self, no other. Only the gentle flow of existence rising and falling without clinging. He had awakened. He was now the Buddha, the one who has awakened. The earth was quiet around him. The river glowed faintly with the first colors of morning. The leaves above shimmered softly, as though bowing in subtle reverence. The entire grove felt alive with a quiet joy. The Buddha sat beneath the fig tree, breathing the cool morning air. A soft smile, serene and knowing, touched his lips. His long search had ended, not in separation from the world, but in deep understanding of it. He touched the earth once more, whispering with his heart rather than words, "May all beings be free." And as the sun rose gently over Uruvela, the light touched his face, the first dawn of a world forever changed. For 7 days after his awakening beneath the fig tree at Uruvela, the Buddha remained seated in serene stillness, absorbing the depth of the freedom he had realized. The grove lay quiet around him. The river flowed with gentle murmurs, reflecting the pale shimmer of dawn and the warm glow of dusk. Birds sang in the branches, insects hummed lightly in the grass, and soft breezes drifted through the leaves overhead. But inside him, there was perfect stillness. He sat in the peace of complete understanding, letting the mind rest in the clarity it had uncovered. As the days passed, the Buddha walked slowly through the grove, observing the world with eyes that saw no separation, no illusion. Every blade of grass, every creature, every passing breeze felt woven into the same fabric. Each arising through conditions, each passing away, each existing in a gentle web of interdependence. He felt no pride, no desire for recognition, no trace of the self-centeredness that once shaped the thoughts of an unawakened mind. What remained was compassion, deep, boundless, unobstructed, flowing naturally through him like water through a clear stream bed. During the second 7 days, he gazed upon the Bodhi tree with quiet gratitude. Not worship, but recognition. The tree had stood steady through the long night of his awakening, sheltering him, anchoring him, mirroring the stillness he cultivated within. The Buddha walked around it slowly, sensing the rhythms of life moving quietly through its roots and branches. Each leaf shimmered like a small jewel when touched by light. He felt the continuity of countless causes that had led to this moment. His past lives, his parents' choices, the 4 sights, the austerities, the insight of the middle way. Nothing had been accidental. Everything had flowed naturally toward awakening. During the 3rd week, he sat beneath another tree, contemplating the profundity of dependent origination, the chain of arising, ignorance, formation, consciousness, name and form, The six senses, contact, feeling, craving, clinging, becoming, birth, and suffering, unfolded in his mind with shimmering clarity. He saw not merely the pattern of human grief, but the blueprint by which the world wove itself moment after moment. And seeing the chain, he saw how it could be broken, not by destroying the world, but by seeing it with unhindered clarity, free of craving. Yet even as he remained absorbed in this newfound truth, a quiet question arose within him. Not from ignorance, but from compassion. The truth he had realized was deep, subtle, difficult to express in words. It was not a doctrine that could be handed from teacher to student like a tool. It was a way of seeing, a shift in the very nature of perception. How could he teach such a profound understanding to others? Would they grasp it? Would they misunderstand? Would it confuse more than liberate? As he contemplated this dilemma, a subtle presence emerged within his awareness. It was not a voice, not a form, but an intuitive sense, like a breeze carrying meaning instead of sound. It expressed itself gently, like a ripple moving across the surface of consciousness, that there were beings in the world with only a thin layer of dust upon their eyes. If he did not share what he had seen, they might lose the chance to awaken in this lifetime. Compassion swelled within him, warm and steady. The Buddha understood then that teaching was not merely possible, it was necessary, not for himself, but for those ready to walk the path. He rose from the grove and began his journey to find the first people he would teach. The 5 ascetics who had once practiced with him. Though they had abandoned him at the riverbank, misunderstanding his acceptance of Sujata's rice milk, he felt no resentment. Compassion flowed toward them as naturally as breath. They had sought the end of suffering with sincerity, though their understanding had been incomplete. He felt certain that if anyone could grasp the middle way, it would be them. He walked along forest paths as dust swirled quietly around his feet. Villagers saw him passing and sensed something radiant in his presence. Some offered fruit, others water, drawn by a gentle tranquility that needed no words. They did not know who he was, but they felt the peace that emanated from him. Unassuming, profound, warm. Children approached him without fear, touching the edges of his robe before running back to their families. Animals stepped aside yet lingered near him, sensing no danger, only softness. The Buddha traveled barefoot, unhurried, letting the journey unfold naturally. He crossed rivers by stepping on smooth stones. He slept beneath trees, listening to the night wind. He accepted alms with gratitude, bowing to those who offered food. His presence brought calm wherever he went, like a cool breeze spreading across a hot plain. After many days, he reached the outskirts of Varanasi, where the deer park of Isipatana lay. Open fields of tall grass, clusters of trees casting wide shade, and gentle animals roaming freely. The 5 ascetics lived there, practicing austerities in hopes of achieving liberation. When they saw Siddhartha approaching from a distance, their first instinct was rejection. They remembered how he had accepted nourishment, how he had washed his body, how he had abandoned their strict discipline. They whispered among themselves, "Here comes the ascetic who gave up the path. We should not honor him. We should not greet him." But as he drew closer, something changed. His presence seemed to fill the air with calm. His steps were light yet purposeful. His eyes shone with a clarity they had never seen before, gentle, steady, luminous. The anguish that once clouded his face during the years of starvation had vanished. In its place rested a peace so complete that even the ascetics felt its warmth before they understood it. Without meaning to, they rose to their feet. They had not planned to greet him, but respect pulled them upward like an invisible tide. Kondanya, the eldest, felt a tremor of recognition move through him. This was not the Siddhartha they had known. Something vast had awakened in him. The Buddha approached slowly, smiling with calm compassion. They placed a mat for him despite their earlier intention. When he sat down, the grass seemed to settle around him, as though the earth recognized the significance of the moment. The ascetics remained standing for a breath, unsure of how to begin. At last, Kondanya knelt, bowing slightly. "Friend Gautama," he said carefully, "you no longer follow our discipline. You abandoned your austerities. How then could you have found the truth?" The Buddha's smile did not waver. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet and steady, like water flowing over smooth stone. "Kondanya, you know I have not spoken falsehood. I have awakened to the deathless. I have found the path that ends suffering. If you listen, I will teach it." A hush fell over the grove. The ascetics exchanged looks, but something in the Buddha's tone, gentle yet unshakable, cut through their doubts. They lowered themselves onto the grass, forming a small semicircle before him. Deer grazed at a distance, their ears flicking as though listening. The Buddha closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, the world seemed to exhale. Then he began to speak. Not as a prince, not as an ascetic, but as one who had seen clearly. He spoke of the middle way, of avoiding extremes of indulgence and self-mortification. He spoke of balance, clarity, and freedom. The ascetics listened, their minds quieting, their old assumptions loosening one by one. Then the Buddha delivered the first turning of the wheel of Dhamma. "There is suffering," he said softly, but with a resonance that seemed to vibrate through the earth. Birth is suffering. Jing is suffering. Sickness is suffering. Death is suffering. Sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair are suffering. Association with the unloved is suffering. Separation from the loved is suffering. Not getting what one desires is suffering. In short, the 5 aggregates affected by clinging are suffering. The words settled over the ascetics like a slow wave, heavy yet honest. They felt as though someone had spoken aloud a truth they had sensed all their lives, but could never fully articulate. "There is a cause of suffering," the Buddha continued, a gentle firmness in his voice. "Craving is the cause. Craving for pleasure, craving for becoming, craving for non-becoming." Kondanya leaned forward slightly, his breath unconsciously holding. "There is the end of suffering," the Buddha said, the faintest smile returning to his lips. "The fading away of craving, the letting go, the release, the unbinding. And finally, there is a path leading to the end of suffering, the noble eightfold path. Right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration." The grove grew so quiet that one could hear the faint rustling of distant leaves. The ascetics felt the teaching settle into them, like seeds falling into receptive earth. Something awakened in Kondanya, a spark of deep recognition. He felt the truth of the Buddha's words not only in his mind, but in the quiet turning of his heart. And in that moment, as the Buddha finished speaking, Kondanya glimpsed the truth of impermanence so clearly that his mind opened like a flower touched by dawn. He became the first disciple to enter the stream of awakening. The Buddha saw the clarity in his eyes and spoke softly. Kondanya has understood. The others soon followed. As the days passed, the Buddha elaborated on suffering, its cause, its cessation, and the path leading toward freedom. The ascetics listened, practiced, reflected, and gradually their understanding deepened. The grove at Isipatana became a place where the air seemed charged with transformation, where deer wandered unafraid through the tall grass, where the Buddha's voice carried across the fields like a gentle wind. Word began to spread quietly, first through the villages nearby, then across the lands. People heard rumors of a teacher whose presence brought peace, whose words cut through confusion, who taught not through authority, but through gentle clarity. They came by foot, by cart, sometimes from great distances, drawn by something they could not name. The Sangha, the community of monks, began with these 5. They shaved their heads, donned simple robes, and dedicated themselves wholly to the path. The Buddha walked with them through fields and forests, teaching meditation beneath trees, guiding them through the subtleties of the mind. Their numbers grew. One by one, seekers approached, some from wealthy families, some from simple villages, some wandering ascetics tired of fruitless austerities. The Buddha welcomed all of them without preference. He taught without dogma, without demand for worship, without clinging to any identity. He taught through truth, compassion, and the quiet clarity of lived understanding. And so, in the deer park of Isipatana, under the quiet watch of trees and grazing animals, the wheel of Dhamma began to turn, moving gently at first, then gathering the momentum of countless hearts seeking freedom. The world had changed. And though its people did not yet know the full extent of that change, a new path had opened, soft as dawn, clear as water, steady as earth, inviting all beings to walk it. The days following the first turning of the wheel in the quiet deer park unfolded with a soft sense of inevitability. The Buddha walked gently among the trees each morning, his robe brushing against the tall grass as sunlight filtered through the branches. The 5 ascetics, now monks, followed him with a reverence shaped not by devotion to a master, but by a deep recognition of truth. The grove, once a place of solitary austerity, now resonated with subtle joy, a quiet radiance born from understanding, like dew shimmering on leaves in the first light of dawn. Each morning, the monks walked slowly along the dusty paths into the nearby village for alms. Their bowls were simple, their steps measured and mindful. Villagers began to notice a new steadiness in these men who had once been severe and hollow in their practice. Now their faces seemed calm, their eyes bright with a gentler kind of discipline. People offered rice, vegetables, and fruit, sensing something profound unfolding among these quiet wanderers. The Buddha himself walked at the front of the small group. Though he owned nothing but his robe and bowl, he radiated a peace that drew attention wherever he went. Children tugged at their mother's sleeves, pointing as he passed, whispering in curiosity. Some villagers bowed, uncertain why they felt compelled to do so. Others simply watched in silence, touched by a presence they could not name. One morning, as the Buddha and the monks walked their alms round, a young man named Yasa approached from a distance. Unlike the monks, he wore fine garments, silks dyed in deep reds and golds, embroidered with delicate patterns. His posture was tense, his face marked with distress. Yasa came from a wealthy family, but that morning he had awakened in his father's mansion overwhelmed by a sudden sense of emptiness. The feast of the previous night, the dancers, the scented lamps, the soft music, all of it had seemed beautiful before, but now felt hollow, fragile, brittle like a painted shell. It had struck him with force. Even amidst luxury, the mind could be restless, craving, unsatisfied. He had walked away from the mansion in confusion, searching for a place to quiet his thoughts. As dawn broke, he found himself near the deer park. From a distance, he saw the Buddha sitting beneath a tree, the morning light glinting softly on the folds of his robe. Something about that serene figure drew Yasa forward, as though gently pulling him out of his turmoil. When Yasa reached the Buddha, his steps faltered. He bowed awkwardly, overwhelmed by emotion. "Sir," he said, voice trembling, "my mind is troubled. I feel no peace, though I have every comfort. My life feels empty." The Buddha looked at him with the steady compassion of someone who had heard such words many times across many lifetimes. "Sit here, Yasa," he said softly. "Let your mind rest for a moment." Yasa sat beside him on the grass. The breeze moved lightly across the clearing, carrying the scent of morning dew. Birds fluttered in the branches above. The Buddha spoke gently, explaining the nature of suffering, not to frighten, but to clarify. He spoke of how restlessness arises from craving, how moments of pleasure are fleeting, and how the mind seeks something it cannot find in the external world. Yasa listened, feeling the tightness in his chest loosen with each word. The Buddha then spoke of release, of letting go, of understanding the impermanent nature of all things, and of finding liberation not through possessions, but through insight. As the words entered Yasa's heart, something inside him shifted. It was not a dramatic revelation, but a soft unfurling, like a lotus opening at dawn. Suddenly, the weight he had been carrying seemed to dissolve. His mind became clear and light. In that moment, Yasa glimpsed a truth beyond the world of wealth and pleasure, a truth more expansive than anything he had known. He looked at the Buddha and saw him not as a teacher of ideas, but as one who had walked the path to freedom himself. "Let me follow you," Yasa said, voice steady now. "Let me learn this path." The Buddha nodded gently. And so Yasa became the first lay follower to enter the stream of awakening. When Yasa's father came searching for his son later that morning, the Buddha welcomed him with the same calm warmth. He spoke to him of generosity, virtue, and the benefits of living with a clear and compassionate mind. Yasa's father listened with sincerity, and by the end of their conversation, he too felt a shift inside, a quiet clarity emerging from confusion. He bowed before the Buddha, requesting both refuge and guidance, becoming the first lay supporter to formally place his devotion in the triple gem, the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. As days passed, more young men from the surrounding villages came to seek teaching. Some were friends of Yasa. Others were inspired by the peace they saw in the monks or the wisdom they heard whispered among villagers. The Sangha grew, not out of force, not by persuasion, but by the natural pull of truth recognized in quiet hearts. The Buddha continued to walk from village to village, teaching in groves, under trees, by rivers, in open fields. He spoke not in riddles or lofty language, but in simple, clear truths that anyone could understand. He taught farmers and merchants, royalty and wanderers, scholars and villagers. To each listener, he offered teachings suited to their understanding, shaping his words not to impress, but to illuminate. Soon, word of the Buddha reached the great city of Rajagaha, where King Bimbisara ruled. The king had once met Siddhartha during the ascetic years, when the prince was thin from fasting, but radiant in determination. At that time, Bimbisara had offered him a place in his court, impressed by his bearing. But Siddhartha had declined, explaining his search for truth. Now, news reached the king that this same seeker had attained awakening and was teaching freely across the land. Curious and moved by respect, Bimbisara traveled with his attendants to meet the Buddha in a bamboo grove near the city. When he arrived, he saw the Buddha seated among the monks, his posture serene, his face glowing with quiet understanding. The king approached with reverence. "Siddhartha," he said softly, though the title felt too small now, "you have found what you sought." The Buddha nodded gently. "I found the path that leads beyond sorrow, sire." The king bowed deeply. He asked to hear the teachings, not as a ruler, but as a man seeking wisdom. The Buddha spoke to him of moral conduct, of generosity, of the dangers of greed, hatred, and delusion. He taught the king the importance of ruling with compassion, of seeing all beings with understanding rather than dominance. Bimbisara listened intently. Something awakened within him, a deep respect for this man who had once been a prince of another kingdom, but who now shone with an inner royalty no crown could match. He offered the Buddha a bamboo grove as a dwelling place for the growing community of monks. The grove became known as Veluvana, the first monastic park offered to the Sangha. As the Buddha continued to teach, his following grew across the lands. Some monks were former ascetics, others former merchants, farmers, craftsmen, or scholars. They came from many backgrounds, but within the Sangha they lived equally, shaving their heads, donning simple robes, carrying only an alms bowl and a heart devoted to the path. The Buddha taught them mindfulness, how to observe each breath, each sensation, each feeling, each thought with clarity. He taught them loving kindness, to send goodwill to all beings without exception. He taught them the three marks of existence: impermanence, suffering, and non-self. And he taught them how to see these truths not as abstract ideas, but as realities woven into every experience. The monks practiced diligently. The forests around Rajagaha echoed with moments of deep meditation. In the stillness beneath trees, monks experienced insights that loosened the knots of craving. Some realized freedom quickly. Others progressed slowly, guided by the Buddha's patient instruction. Meanwhile, lay followers flocked to the Buddha's teachings. They brought food for the monks, offered robes, built shelters, and created spaces for meditation. They found in the Dhamma a way to live with less suffering, even without renouncing worldly life. They learned to cultivate virtue, generosity, patience, and wisdom. They found solace in understanding that suffering had causes, and that seeing those causes clearly brought relief. The Buddha moved from place to place, never staying too long in any one location. His presence became a wandering light across the plains of northern India. Villages awaited his visits with quiet anticipation. When he arrived, people gathered beneath shady trees or in open fields, drawn by the gentle power of his voice. He spoke kindness, but not softness. He spoke truth, but not harshness. His words struck the perfect balance, clear, compassionate, and transformative. And through it all, the Sangha grew steadily, like a young forest thriving beneath the warmth of early summer. It grew through sincerity, not obligation, through understanding, not superstition, through clarity, not blind faith. The Buddha watched this growth with calm joy, not pride, never pride. He knew the teachings did not belong to him. They arose from seeing the world as it was. The Dhamma was not a system to be owned, but a path to be walked. He rejoiced that others were finding their steps upon it. The world was beginning to change. The wheel he set in motion at Isipatana continued to turn, gathering momentum with each mind touched by understanding. Monks woke before dawn to meditate. Lay followers practiced generosity and compassion in their daily lives. Kings sought counsel not for power, but for wisdom. Villagers learned to recognize suffering and its causes. And all the while, the Buddha walked gently across the land, carrying neither weapons nor wealth, teaching through presence as much as through speech. The Sangha had become a living field of awakening, rooted in compassion, blooming in understanding. And the Buddha, the one who awakened, continued his journey, step by gentle step, across the vast plains of India, planting seeds of liberation wherever he went. The Buddha's teaching years unfolded like a long, calm river winding across the landscape of northern India. Wherever he walked, a quiet transformation followed. Sometimes subtle, sometimes profound, spreading from person to person like the slow blossoming of a lotus. Villages that had once known only superstition or rigid ritual began to fill with conversations about compassion, impermanence, and inner peace. Monks meditated in forest groves, their breaths steady and deep. Lay followers practiced generosity and ethical conduct. Kings sought wisdom not for conquest, but for ruling in harmony with their people. And through it all, the Buddha moved with the same gentle presence, unhurried, never clinging to praise nor shaken by criticism. As the Sangha grew, so too did the stories of those who found refuge in the Buddha's teachings. Each person came with unique burdens: grief, anger, fear, confusion, and each found solace in the clarity of his words. Among the many lives touched by the Dhamma, some stories echoed across the region with particular resonance, becoming part of the collective memory of the early Buddhist community. One such story began near the city of Savatthi, where a young woman named Kisagotami lived. She had married into a wealthy family and given birth to her first child, a son whom she cherished with a love that filled her days with light. But life's uncertainty is ever present, and one day the child grew ill. Kisagotami sought help from healers, prayed to gods, performed rituals, yet none could halt the steady decline of her beloved boy. When he finally died in her arms, her mind could not accept the truth. The grief was too sharp, too overwhelming, carving into her heart with unbearable force. She wrapped the child in cloth and rushed through the town, pleading with anyone who would listen. Please, she cried, give me medicine that will bring my son back to life. Villagers turned away, saddened but helpless. Some spoke gently to her, others shook their heads with pity. But Kisa Gautami's mind would not grasp the reality of death. Her desperation drove her from house to house until someone, seeing her suffering and recalling stories of the Buddha's compassion, urged her to seek him. Kisa Gautami found the Buddha seated beneath a tree, surrounded by monks and lay followers. She fell to her knees before him, tears streaming down her face. Please, sir, she begged. Please give me medicine for my son. He is ill. He is not breathing, but he can be saved. I know he can. The Buddha looked upon her with deep compassion. He understood that reason would not reach her while grief clouded her mind. Instead, he spoke gently. Kisa Gautami, I can help you, but I require a mustard seed. Hope flared in her eyes. I will bring one, she said quickly. Bring me, the Buddha continued, a mustard seed from a household that has never known death. Kisa Gautami bowed and hurried away, clutching her child close. She knocked on door after door. Each time she asked the same question. Have you or anyone in this house ever lost a loved one? And each time she heard words that slowly chipped away at her grief-blinded mind. My mother died last year. We lost our daughter. My brother fell ill and passed away. My husband died when my children were still young. Every household, every person she met, spoke of loss. Kisa Gautami's steps grew slower with each visit. Her breath deepened, her eyes softened. Understanding began to rise through the fog of her sorrow. By dusk, she stood on a quiet road outside the town, looking out at the setting sun. She placed her child gently on the ground and whispered, Death does not spare anyone. Her tears fell softly onto the earth, but now they were tears of acceptance, not denial. She returned to the Buddha empty-handed, her hands open, her heart finally recognizing the truth. I could not find a single household untouched by death, she said quietly. The Buddha nodded, his eyes filled with warmth. Kisa Gautami, you are not alone in your loss. All beings are bound to impermanence. Understanding this is the first step toward peace. He offered her the teachings, and in time, Kisa Gautami found refuge in them. She joined the community of nuns, her grief transformed into compassion for others who suffered. Another story that echoed widely was that of Angulimala, a man who had become feared across kingdoms for his violence. His name meant garland of fingers, for he wore a gruesome necklace made from the severed fingers of those he had killed. Once a bright and capable student, Angulimala had been deceived by jealousy and manipulation. His teacher, driven by resentment of Angulimala's brilliance, convinced him that spiritual greatness required collecting the fingers of 1,000 victims. Misled and desperate for approval, Angulimala descended into madness, attacking travelers and villagers alike. The fear he inspired grew so immense that entire roads were abandoned. Families locked themselves indoors at night, whispering prayers to avoid crossing his path. Even armed soldiers hesitated to confront him. One morning, the Buddha sensed Angulimala's tormented mind from miles away. He walked slowly in the direction of the man's forest hideout. Villagers saw him passing and cried out, "Do not go that way. Angulimala will kill you." But the Buddha continued, his steps steady, his expression calm. As Angulimala caught sight of the Buddha walking alone along the forest path, he felt curiosity mixed with the predatory instinct that had come to dominate his days. He raised his weapon and charged, but something strange happened. The faster he ran, the farther the Buddha seemed. Angulimala sprinted with all his strength, yet the Buddha walked with unhurried steps, always just out of reach. Breathless and confused, Angulimala shouted, "Stop, ascetic! Stop!" The Buddha turned slightly, eyes soft. "Angulimala," he said gently, "I have stopped. It is you who has not stopped." The words landed like a stone in the still waters of Angulimala's mind. For a moment he trembled, hearing in those simple words an invitation to look inward. His weapon lowered. Something in his heart, long buried beneath violence and fear, broke open. The Buddha approached, offering compassion instead of judgment. He spoke of the harm Angulimala had done, but also of the possibility of transformation. The forest seemed to hold its breath as the man who had terrified so many sank to his knees before the Buddha. "Let me follow you," Angulimala whispered, tears striking the earth. "Let me find peace." The Buddha accepted him. Many doubted that someone with such a past could change, but the Buddha saw in him the potential for deep transformation. Angulimala shaved his head, donned the robe, and joined the Sangha. Though villagers trembled when they saw him at first, his behavior softened. He practiced tirelessly, enduring insults and thrown stones without anger. When people hid behind their doors, he left alms bowls with quiet gestures of kindness. Slowly, their fear faded. Over time, Angulimala became a symbol of how even the most troubled heart could awaken. During these years of teaching, the Buddha also returned to Kapilavastu. Word had reached his father, King Suddhodana, that his son had not only survived his departure, but had become a revered teacher. The king, though proud, felt a deep ache of longing. When the Buddha arrived at the palace gates with several hundred monks, the city gathered in awe. The king approached, dignified yet trembling. He looked upon his son, not as a prince, not as a wanderer, but as someone radiant with profound peace. "Wherever you go," the king said softly, "people bow before you, but you are my son. Should I bow before you as well?" The Buddha smiled gently. "You bow not to your son, but to one who has awakened." The king knelt, the palace filled with quiet reverence as the Buddha taught his family. His stepmother, Mahapajapati, became deeply devoted and later sought ordination as a nun, helping establish the community of women practitioners. His wife, Yasodhara, listened with calm dignity, recognizing in his presence the same gentle understanding she had always known. Rahula, his young son, approached shyly, asking for his own place among the monks. The Buddha welcomed him, teaching him gently and guiding him with the compassion of both father and teacher. Not all events during these years were peaceful. Devadatta, the Buddha's cousin, grew jealous of his influence. A monk known for charisma and discipline, Devadatta longed for leadership and saw in the Buddha a rival. His ambition clouded his judgment. He began criticizing the Buddha, attempting to split the Sangha, and even plotted to harm him. Yet each scheme failed, not through confrontation, but through the Buddha's quiet wisdom. Devadatta's mind grew turbulent, and his once bright potential dimmed under the weight of jealousy. Though the Buddha extended compassion even to him, Devadatta's own choices carried him into suffering. Through war and peace, harvest and famine, joy and sorrow, the Buddha continued teaching with the same calm clarity. He traveled from village to village, city to city, always walking barefoot along dusty roads, carrying nothing but his robe and bowl. Kings debated his teachings with intrigue. Scholars questioned him earnestly. Farmers listened with gratitude. Children gazed at him with wonder. And everywhere he went, the Sangha grew. Monks meditated in forests across the land. Nuns found strength and purpose within their community. Lay supporters practiced generosity and virtue, transforming their lives through kindness and mindful living. The Buddha's teachings spread not through force, but through the gentle magnetism of truth recognized by peaceful hearts. The world was changing, quietly, deeply, as compassion rippled outward across the land. The Buddha's final years unfolded with the same calm rhythm that had shaped his decades of teaching. His days began before dawn, when the sky was still a cool, dark blue, and birds had not yet begun their first soft songs. He would rise quietly, washing his face in cool water and wrapping his robe around him with unhurried movements. Then he would step out into the early air, walking slowly beneath the pale light of the waning moon. Monks would gather, bowing with reverence, but he always returned their bows with gentle equality. To him, no one stood above another. All were bound by the same patterns of birth, aging, sickness, and death, and all sought the same freedom. Though age touched his body, creasing the skin around his eyes, softening the strength in his limbs, his mind shone with unbroken clarity. He walked with a calm steadiness, each step mindful, each breath deep. The Sangha had grown to thousands across the regions, living in forest monasteries, city parks, and quiet groves. His teachings echoed in quivering leaves and whispered in the hearts of countless beings. Scholars debated his words with curiosity. Farmers practiced mindfulness in their fields. Kings sought counsel during troubled times. And throughout these years, the Buddha moved with unwavering compassion, never tiring of guiding those who approached him. His attendant, Ananda, remained near him always, faithful, attentive, gentle. Ananda had a mind like a clear stream that held every word spoken by the Buddha, every teaching, every story, every moment of significance. He walked slightly behind, watching carefully for signs of fatigue, offering water when needed, keeping track of visitors, requests, and the needs of the Sangha. Though his devotion was deep, he saw in the Buddha not an object of worship, but a teacher and friend whose presence brought peace to the mind simply by being near. As the Buddha aged, he continued traveling, moving from village to village with small groups of monks. He walked slowly across dusty roads, through forests of tall bamboo, through fields alive with crickets, through towns where people recognized him and bowed with gratitude. Though his body aged, his heart remained vast and boundless. He offered teachings not as doctrine, but as guidance. Small, simple truths that pointed inward, toward the mind's own potential for freedom. One year during the rains retreat, the Buddha stayed in Varanasi. The river Ganges shimmered nearby, rising with the monsoon, carrying silt and blossoms and broken leaves washed down from distant hills. The Buddha spoke often with Ananda and the monks, reminding them of impermanence. He urged them not to cling to him. "Be a lamp unto yourselves," he said softly one evening, his voice carrying the weight of years. "Do not depend on others for your refuge. Let the Dhamma be your guide." Ananda listened with deep emotion, sensing the quiet shift in the Buddha's tone. Though the Buddha spoke often of impermanence, there was something gently final in his words now. Something that trembled like a soft breeze moving through the branches. When the rain's retreat ended, the Buddha resumed his journey, walking toward the region of Vesali. The road stretched long beneath a sky that shifted from overcast gray to brilliant blue, from clear to misty, from dawn's faint blush to twilight's golden glow. As he walked, the Buddha grew slightly weaker. He paused more often, leaning lightly against a tree or sitting near a riverbank to rest. His breathing, though steady, carried subtle hints of fatigue. His mind remained luminous, but the body that housed it began showing the natural signs of age. Ananda noticed, worry flickering across his features like shadows passing through sunlight. "Venerable sir," he said gently one morning, "perhaps we should rest here for some days. Your strength has waned." The Buddha smiled kindly. "Ananda, this body is like an old cart held together with ropes, yet it serves its purpose. Let us continue. There is still more to be done." And so they walked to Vesali, where a great assembly of monks had gathered. The Buddha taught them the principles of mindfulness, urging them to observe body, feelings, mind, and mental formations with clarity. He spoke of guarding the senses, cultivating loving kindness, and pursuing the path with diligence. He offered his final teachings to the lay people of Vesali, who cherished him like a beloved elder, knowing perhaps that his time among them grew short. When they left Vesali, Ananda noticed the Buddha pause on the road, turning to look back at the city. His expression was serene, but tinged with a quiet farewell. "Vesali," the Buddha murmured, "this is the last time I shall see you." Ananda's heart tightened, but he said nothing. He only bowed deeply, committing every detail to memory. The Buddha's posture, the tone of his voice, the glimmer of light on his robe. They traveled next toward Pava. The road meandered through groves of sal trees. The sky above them softened to pink as evening approached. In Pava, a blacksmith's son named Kunda invited the Buddha and his followers to a meal. Kunda prepared dishes with sincere devotion, offering them with reverence. The Buddha accepted without complaint, knowing the layman's intention was pure. After eating, however, weakness overtook him. His body trembled, and he experienced severe pain. It is said that the meal, though offered with kindness, had been improper for one of his age and condition. Ananda, stricken with worry, attempted to intervene. "Venerable sir, let us seek help. Allow me to bring physicians." But the Buddha raised a gentle hand, his face calm despite the pain. "No, Ananda. Kunda's gift was given with a heart of purity. Lay no blame upon him. Tell others that Kunda's offering will bring great merit." That night, after resting briefly, the Buddha spoke with Ananda, offering him comfort in the midst of his distress. "Everything that arises must pass away, Ananda. Do not grieve. You have served me with loyalty and love. You have been face to face with me for many years. Whatever happens now, continue diligently on the path. When dawn broke, the Buddha requested that they continue toward the nearby town of Kusinara. Ananda supported him along the way, his steps slow and steady. The road was quiet, lined with trees whose leaves rustled softly in the warming air. They passed through small villages where people bowed with deep respect, sensing the gravity of the moment, even without fully understanding it. At midday, the Buddha asked to stop by the banks of a cool river. He stepped carefully into the water, cleansing his body, feeling the soothing touch of the current. Ananda watched, holding his robe ready. The scene held a solemn beauty. An awakened one washing himself for the final time in this world, bathed in sunlight, surrounded by breeze and flowing water. They crossed the river and continued slowly until they reached a grove of sal trees. The trees stood tall and symmetrical, their leaves shimmering in the gentle afternoon light. It was a peaceful place, quiet and serene, touched by a faint breeze that carried the fragrance of blossoms. The Buddha paused there, looking around with the eyes of one who sees beauty in every impermanent shape. "Ananda," he said softly, "let us rest here. Spread my cloak between these twin sal trees." Ananda obeyed, his hands trembling. He arranged the robe carefully on the earth. The Buddha lay down on his right side, his head supported by his hand, his feet aligned. A posture of serene repose, both mindful and restful. He settled into the earth as though returning to a familiar embrace. Then a remarkable thing occurred. Out of season, the sal trees began to shed their blossoms. Pale petals drifted down like gentle snow, falling upon the Buddha's body, glimmering softly against the fabric of his robe. The fragrance of the flowers seemed to deepen, filling the grove with quiet reverence. Beings unseen, devas, the legends say, gathered invisibly, paying homage as petals continued to fall. "Do not honor me with perfumes or garlands," the Buddha said softly to Ananda. "If you wish to honor me, practice the Dhamma with sincerity. Walk the path. Live with virtue. Cultivate a pure heart. This is the greatest offering." Ananda knelt beside him, tears gathering in his eyes. "Please do not leave us," he whispered. "Venerable Sir, the Sangha still needs your guidance." The Buddha looked at him with profound warmth. "Ananda, do not grieve. All conditioned things must pass away. It cannot be otherwise. But the Dhamma and the Vinaya shall be your teacher after I am gone." Monks began to gather beneath the sal trees, sitting quietly around their teacher. Lay people from nearby villages arrived, bowing with tears in their eyes. The grove hummed with a kind of stillness that seemed to stretch beyond the boundaries of time. The Buddha spoke to them, offering final teachings with the same gentle clarity that had guided so many. He encouraged them to avoid extremes, to cultivate mindfulness, to speak truth, to avoid harming living beings, to walk the Noble Eightfold Path with earnest hearts. He urged them not to cling to him, reminding them that liberation lay not in worship, but in understanding. As the sun descended, painting the sky with hues of gold and rose, the air cooled. The sal leaves rustled softly overhead. Fireflies appeared, glowing faintly in the deepening twilight. The Buddha's breath grew slower, each inhalation soft, each exhalation peaceful. Yet his mind remained clear, unclouded by fear or regret. "Ananda," the Buddha said in a voice like a quiet breeze, The time has come. Call the monks. Ananda called them. They gathered close, sitting in silence. The Buddha looked upon them with deep compassion. "Monks," he said, "impermanence is the nature of all things. Work diligently for your own liberation." These were his final words. The grove grew still. The light dimmed. The Buddha's breath slowed, then ceased. Peaceful, natural, calm. The petals continued to fall, covering his body in soft white and pale gold. The world did not tremble, nor did the sky break with thunder. Instead, the moment passed quietly, like dusk settling into night. The Buddha had entered Parinirvāṇa. Ananda wept softly, though he remembered the Buddha's teaching and tried to hold his heart steady. The monks bowed deeply. The lay people whispered prayers. In the silence that followed, a sense of gentle awe spread through the grove. Though the Buddha's physical presence had passed, the Dhamma, the truth he uncovered, remained alive, breathing through the hearts of those who understood it. When dawn rose the next morning, it found the monks sitting in quiet meditation around the sal trees. The air smelled of blossoms and fresh earth. Birds called softly from above. And though grief lingered, it was tempered by gratitude for the Buddha's life, for his teachings, for the path he left behind. In the years that followed, the Sangha preserved his teachings, repeating them word by word, breath by breath, until they became the living pulse of generations. They carried the Dhamma across mountains and rivers, across kingdoms and villages, across centuries and cultures. They shared the truth of suffering and the path to freedom. They continued the gentle, patient work begun beneath the Bodhi tree. And the Buddha, though no longer walking the earth in human form, lived on in every moment of compassion, in every breath of mindfulness, in every insight that dissolved suffering. His life became a lantern passed from hand to hand, illuminating the darkness of ignorance with the soft glow of understanding. His presence remained in the quiet places, in the rustle of sal leaves, in the stillness of dawn, in the breath of one who sits in meditation. The teachings that flowed from his awakening continued to guide countless beings. Each step taken along the path echoing the steps he once walked across the ancient soil. The world changed again and again. Empires rose and fell. Cultures flourished and faded. Seasons turned through millennia. But the Dhamma endured, timeless as the sky, offering peace to all who sought it. And beneath the trees where he passed into final peace, the earth remembered the touch of the one who awakened. Not with monuments, not with grandeur, but with the simple whisper of the wind through the leaves. All things arise, all things pass away, and freedom lies in understanding this truth.